Thea Realm Fighters, Mortal Kombat 3, and American Hero. What do these three products have in common? Actors. The Atari Jaguar is best known for its terrible fighting games and low 3D graphics. However, despite its low claim to fame, it's loaded with hidden gems that never got to experience true appreciation. The Atari Jaguar struggled during its launch and tried to piggyback off of a lot of the fads at the time. Atari was the first of many, including the first to introduce a color handheld, the first to feature a left hand and right hand function amongst controls, the first to delve into fully functional VR prototypes, and the first to release a pseudo 64-bit console. Despite its many accomplishments, Atari, or rather its modern reiterations, aims to be the first of many other variants as the first gaming company to come out of limbo after decades of exile as a top competitor. During the struggle of the Atari Jaguar's life, Atari reached deep into the fads of the time and made multiple clones of seemingly glitchy games. In fact, during its life cycle, many prototypes of early development betas were shown across magazines and tech articles between 1993 and 1995. This includes the likes of Speedster 2, Conan the Barbarian, Dactyl Joust, Caves of Fear, The American Hero, and many more. One game, however, that reached the holy grail of infamy was Thea Realm Fighters, an unreleased fighting game for the Atari Jaguar. The Atari Jaguar is no stranger to shitty fighting titles. As a personal opinion, despite others' claims, I say that Kasumi Ninja and Ultra Vortek are absolute gems that go underappreciated despite being obvious knockoffs of both Mortal Kombat and Killer Instinct. Double Dragon 5 is blasphemous in its own right, and personally I find that the Sega Genesis version is the best with the larger roster, sexual themes, gore, decent color palettes, and better controls. The Atari Jaguar version, however, has a smaller roster, terrible controls, but better graphics. Dragon is a great title, but hard to get through if you're a newbie to fighting games, and Fight for Life has a history best saved for another video. In short, the release product was made by the same AM2 creator of Virtua Fighter, and due to the lack of payment, the full version of the game was never released. So if the Atari Jaguar failed in the fighting genre, why is Thea Realm Fighters considered a rare gem amongst prototypes? Well, for starters, Atari attempted to do something different in an attempt to clone Mortal Kombat. This includes hiring high-voltage software who then hired some of the cast members of the original Mortal Kombat and using these actors for many characters in the roster. This is the same high-voltage software who would develop other games for the Jaguar like White Men Can't Jump, Ruiner Pinball, VidGrid, and more. Among the actors hired includes Caitlin Powell, originally known as Caitlin Zamir, Daniel Pesina, Ho-Sung Pak, and Philip Ahn. Although it's hard to prove any legitimacy of contract between Mortal Kombat and Atari at the time, it is known that Mortal Kombat 3 was planned for Jaguar and contracts were in place with the actress who would later play Sindel for American Hero and various other artists for Thea Realm Fighters. I did inquire with some of the Mortal Kombat artists, and understandably they were unable to shed light on the game, either because the messages weren't received or various unknown reasons. My respect and support goes out to these artists in their future endeavors. Other than to confirm her involvement, Caitlin Powell did not have much to say, and my respects humbly go out to her. Godspeed with everything that you do. So, what is Thea Realm Fighters exactly? Theorem Fighters, also known as Shurator's Galactic Challenge in other countries, is a fighting game made by High Voltage Software and originally planned for release in October of 1995. It was postponed as a proposed 90% completion, but canned officially in January of 1996 due to the impending cancellation of the Atari Jaguar. It wouldn't be until 2016 that Nick Persinogen would leak the prototypes of the Alpha, Beta, and Maze ROMs online, each one having content of their own, and the maze being a confusing mess with a variety of characters plastered all over the walls. More on this later. A simple Google search will tell you that Theorem Fighters would house a roster of 25 characters total, with 12 to choose from, each containing alternative skins, plus unlockable sub-bosses and 5 new characters to unlock as well. The entire roster is not included, but according to Wikipedia, the list would consist of the following playable characters. Most importantly, this leads up to our next bit of relevant information regarding Thea Realm Fighters. High Voltage Software had also hired the actors for Mortal Kombat 1 and 2, including Ho-Sung Pak, who played Liu Kang in the Mortal Kombat series, and he also served as technical advisor for the choreography of Thea Realm Fighters. Philip Ahn, who previously played Shang Tsung in Mortal Kombat 2, Caitlin Zamir, or Caitlin Powell, who previously played Katana, Melina, and Jade in Mortal Kombat 2, and of course, Daniel Pesina, who played Johnny Cage and the ninjas in the Mortal Kombat series. More specifically at this time, this took place shortly after the lawsuit that Daniel had taken out on Midway, which would inevitably lead to his cancellation in Mortal Kombat 3. He would be replaced by Christopher Alexander. Daniel Pesina would go on to work with Tattoo Assassins and act as the marquee mascot for Bloodsport, two equally important Mortal Kombat ripoffs of the time, the likes of which Thea Realm Fighters has been considered to be part of. Ho-Sung Pak, Caitlin Powell, and Daniel Pesina were seemingly a trio in the 90s and would often work on mutual productions together from video games to movies. Look into Book of Swords, released in 1996 for more information. If the plot wasn't thick enough, American Hero would see the talents of Musetta Vander join in with Atari, as production began for both American Hero and Mortal Kombat Annihilation in the same year, Annihilation not being in relation to Atari at the time. Both of these would have been scheduled to release around the same time of that year. Although these two products are not necessarily related, however, soon enough this project too would be cancelled, leaving Mortal Kombat on top and a bad taste in the mouth of Atari Jaguar enthusiasts who waited in anticipation for the first adult-themed Atari Jaguar game. American Hero, like Caves of Fear, would take advantage of the SendPlay software used for the Jaguar CD, an element never really implemented the way that it was intended. Regardless, Musetta Vander, Daniel Pesina, Caitlin Powell, and Ho-Sung Pak had an outstanding relevance to what Atari was leading up to, but ultimately never achieved. The production and cancellation of Mortal Kombat 3, planned to release closer to the fourth quarter of 1996, was a big letdown for former game designers and fighting game enthusiasts. It wouldn't be until 2019, with an interview conducted by Arcade Attack with former programmer Tal Funky Baloo, that we got a proper confirmation of Mortal Kombat 3 for the Atari Jaguar, even though GamePro magazine issue 79 in February of 1996 confirmed this with a to-be-determined anecdote. Among the list of games we never got to see come to the Atari Jaguar or the Jaguar CD include the following. Needless to say, a Mortal Kombat conversion had been vigorously planned yet cancelled due to Atari's poor sales. This, however, begs the question, if Mortal Kombat 3 was planned for the Jaguar CD, can we really consider Ultra Vortek, Kasumi Ninja, and Thea Realm Fighters as clones? The debate is still there, but I'd like to think that Kasumi Ninja and Ultra Vortek are indeed a separate genre of fighters, but I digress. Bringing it back to Thea Realm Fighters, this prompts me to go more into depth about the game, its few playable characters, and of course, its storyline. Beginning with the Maze demo. The Maze demo, also known as HVSC Maze, was used as a demo by Atari as an example of a special C compiler that High Voltage Software used to optimize some of the chip usage in the console. In this large maze, there are some character bitmaps used as wall textures. There isn't much here to do but explore. With no real end goal to reach in the maze, it leaves little to the imagination but offers an odd little novelty to game collectors. Pressing the 1 and 3 buttons in the keypad will allow you to stretch and compress the wall textures. I have zero proof to prove the following claim, but it is possible that this would have been used later in the final product as part of the game or an Easter egg for exploring or unlocking things. Who knows what could have come of this? Theorem Fighters Alpha is an early development version that shows the game in working order but with limited animation. We'll take a look at this first and get into the beta, which would have resulted in the final product. Again, these are 100% playable and can be purchased or emulated should you want to explore these. I cannot leave any links to where to find these ROMs, but a simple Google search will point you in the right direction. In my experience, using real hardware is the best way to go. In the alpha version, you can pick between a total of 8 playable characters. This includes Drakkar, Chon Ho, Surreal, Onyx, Firina, Velocia, Royal Marshal, and Renegade Marshal. This alpha would be a prototype later adapted for E3 and CES of 1995, and the character selection boxes would later include images of the characters that you were playing. In the CD version, you'll see Prince Pak, played by Ho-Sung Pak, and Sakura, played by Caitlin Powell of Mortal Kombat. There is no audio or sound effects included in the alpha version. There are plenty of movesets that you can use, and some special abilities can be performed, but the alpha version is also prone to crashing depending on how you play or after a battle. Really, it all depends on when and how it will crash, because crash it will. In the early stages of Thea Realm Fighters, all types of ideas were being explored, like Drakkar, a vampire of Bram Stoker's fashion, or possibly a Phantom of the Opera. The Marshals characters, who were robotic in nature similar to Mortal Kombat's Cyrax and Sector. More on this later. Surreal, or as I like to call him, Hippie Moses, or even generic characters like Chon Ho and Onyx, who were monks and ninjas respectively. Rather than approaching sexual attire like most female characters in fighting games often do, we got Fiorina and Velocia, who represent fire and electricity. Honestly, two pretty cool characters in my opinion. Moving on to the beta, this is where the story really thickens, as it is also where we get a look at the final beta to be released to the public. Unlike the alpha before it, a computer AI is not included and can be played with only 2 players. In fact, if you'd like to legally purchase the beta, Wave 1 Games has a reasonably priced copy of the best working build for the prototype release. It comes with a wonderfully made box and glossy manual containing player movesets and more, link in the description below. In the beta prototype, you can pick between 4 characters: Tok, Prince Pak, Spark, and Royal Marshal. In a strange turn of events, Velocia shows up but can't be selected, shown also in a video by First Impression Gaming from about 2 years ago. The reason why this is significant is because we have no idea how many revisions are floating around, so who knows, we may have a gem hidden in the wild somewhere. And the playable prototype, Spark, played by Daniel Pesina, has the most glimmer about his sprites and personally is one of my favorites amongst the 4 characters. Imitating the same move elements of Raiden, he showcases an odd mix between the God of Thunder and Johnny Cage. No doubt, had this game been released, it would have been a great marketing tool for publicity for Atari and possibly some other lawsuits. Prince Pak, again played by Ho-Sung Pak, is a clear knockoff in every way of Liu Kang. Even some of his original movesets shown at E3 and CES of 1995 shows him replicating the same move patterns and elements. The end product, however, shows a hint of originality by turning his hand into an energy-based blade that cuts through the enemy. Pretty cool. Probably the least impressive character for me is Tok. No specific reason as to why, just that I'm not a big fan. It reminds me of a Dollar General Jax crossed with Warhead from War Gods, another game made by Midway using the Mortal Kombat 4 engine. Lastly, looking at Royal Marshal, we'll see the finished robotic design compared to the alpha version, and honestly, I prefer this much better. Unlike the alpha, if you play the same character, a color palette swap is used to tell the difference in characters. Among many new additions, included is also a wide selection of up to 7 different locations throughout the game. You see mountains, various temples, a Hollywood/Hollywood movie set, hypercities, and more. Thea Realm Fighters features similar assets between itself and Mortal Kombat 1 through 3. The robots, mythical deities, odd characters, humans with unlockable abilities, similar colorful environments and backdrops, and lastly, the plot involving all of these fighters from other worlds, realms, and lifestyles in a fight for supremacy against the main boss known as Shredder, who aims to take control of Earth just like many before it. Unfortunately, like many characters noted to be part of the game, we would never get to play against or as Shredder or Electrica, but they would be featured on the promotional material. In the earlier alphas used at E3 and CES of 1995, you could have had the chance to playtest Electrica, played by Caitlin Powell, but would otherwise not be included in the versions that are now downloadable today. It is without a shadow of a doubt that Theorem Fighters is one of the ultimate lost gems of the Atari Jaguar. We may never get a finished product, but as an interesting piece of history, Theorem Fighters will house a special place in my heart. Officially, Thea Realm Fighters was cancelled in January of 1996 along with various other projects such as American Hero, Mortal Kombat 3, Hover Hunter, later changed to Phase Zero, Fear, Caves of Fear, Dactyl Joust, Battle Wheels, Conan the Barbarian, Deathmatch, Nerf Max Force, and many more. According to exclusive interviews with the companies involved with the Jaguar, Jaguar CD, and the Jaguar VR at the time, Hover Hunter, Nerf Max Force, Missile Command 3D, and various other titles were planned for the Jaguar VR, but ultimately never released as Atari would officially merge with JT Storage in 1996, ending the reign of Atari until 2017, where they would become Atari SA and release the Atari VCS. I do have another video regarding this if anyone would like to see it. In my next video, I plan to discuss many lost games for the Jaguar and include some forgotten history for the Jaguar VR. Despite the Jaguar's flop in the video game market, the console has become a bit of a rarity and novelty for many, with developers still making new titles for it to this day. Companies like Wave 1 Games, Reboot, Atari Age, and Songbird Productions, just to name a few. If you ever find one of these in the wild, definitely pick one up and do the math. So what were your thoughts on the lost media mentioned in today's video? Is Thea Realm Fighters something that you would have liked to see for the Jag? And if so, leave your comments below. If you've made it this far, I'd appreciate it if you gave me a like and subscribe. I do plan to make more video game related videos in the future. Until then, I've been Kaz Azan, and thanks for watching.